Welcome, dear friends, to Card Deck Radio here at 11 p.m. And today we're going to continue the study of the book Evolution in Two Worlds. For the ones that are here for the first time, my name is Shane Martin. I am broadcasting from Richmond, Virginia, here at the Spirit Society of Richmond. And I also make sure you are, I am live. Cool, I am live, so let's go. And I am also a member of the Spirit Society of Virginia. So welcome. It's a pleasure and an honor to be with you tonight. And today, we're gonna see chapter 7 of part 2 of the book Evolution in Two Worlds. And as we recall, Evolution in Two Worlds is a book dictated by the spirit physician, Luiz, through two mediums, Chico Xavier and Valdo Vieira. And this book was published in 1958 by the Brazilian Spiritist Federation. And today we're going to discuss chapter 7. And the book has two parts, part 1 and part 2, each part with 20 chapters. So we are more than halfway through the book. And today we're going to talk about social life of the Discarnates. Let me see. And when you think about social life, just looking at the title, what do you think the spirits are going to be doing in the spirit realm? Do you think their social life and their spirit life is similar to ours? Keep that thought in mind. So we know that the spirits are active in the spirit realm, right? So let's see what they're up to, in a sense. Now, I want to bring to your attention that this chapter specifically has been published in the Spiritist magazine. I wrote down here it would be number 17, published back in 2012. And the Spiritist magazine, it's an English periodical that is a wonderful resource for us who are studying the different books of Spiritism. And it's all in the English language. And you can visit the website, thespiritistmagazine.com, and download all the issues free of charge. And there's a free app as well where you can read and take with you wherever you go to nourish your soul as well. Okay, so Luiz starts today's chapter, and I see a few friends in here. Welcome. If I don't see you, feel loved and hugged. And if you're seeing this on demand, we are all together, united as brothers and sisters and children of God. So this chapter starts with a question. So what is the social life of Discarnates like? Okay, so he starts by saying, Luiz starts by saying, on the spirit plane closest to the physical world, almost 2/3 of the societies composed of discarnate beings remain in some way bound to earthly interests. That's very interesting. Let's see if we can put my face in here. So 2/3 of the societies. So first and foremost, he's saying to us, discarnate beings are forming societies in the spirit plane, the spirit realm. And 2/3 of them are bound to earthly interests. So now we have 2/3 and 1/3. Okay, so the first question that comes to mind is, are we bound to earthly interests? So the first exercise of the day, remember, in the preface, Luiz tells us that the goal of this book is for us to study. Of course, we study, we add, we study the foundational books, and every one of the books that we study is very valuable for us. But we also try to bring it to our daily lives. So the first exercise would be, list your current interests. Just pick a piece of paper and write it down. Those are the things I like to do. Those are the things I think about. Those are the things I dream about. And then you list them. Are they earthly interests or are they more elevated interests? Because the spirit life is the real life. So while you and I are incarnated, of course, we're going to have interests. But we should work hard now as incarnate beings. So when we discarnate, because one day we'll all discarnate and be in the spirit realm, we may be less bound to those earthly interests, okay? So he continues. Discarnate beings leave the physical world linked to what they left behind. When they do not roam or go to the infernal purgatory regions connected to the planet in which they originate or where they came from, they work fervently, not only for their own advancement, but also to help those who remain behind. So here are our choices right now. We are discarnate beings, who will be discarnate beings, and the discarnate beings around us are linked to what they left behind. Those may be things they have had while alive, or they may be peoples and relatives and loved ones that they remained incarnated. So they says a proportion of those 2/3 will roam in purgatory regions, in suffering regions connected to the planet. For example, think about the book Nosso Lar by André Luiz, where he describes the lower zones. Those would be those suffering regions where our suffering brothers and sisters are. If they're not there, they would be working fervently, not from their own selves, but for others. Okay, knowing that once we discarnate, we will more likely be and go to where our interests are, where our mind is. Are we today working on being less attached to those earthly interests? And more importantly, am I helping others? Or do I just think about doing things for my own advancement? Right? So let's think about things we can do today, on a small scale, to those who live close to us, to those we work with, even the people we don't know that may be linked to us in a certain way. Could we help them more? What are the tasks, activities that I do on a daily basis? First, we're listing our interests and how earthly or more elevated they were. Now, what are the things we're doing in a daily basis, tasks, activities? Do they only help us, or do they help others? And why am I bringing this to you out of inspiration from the good spirits is that today, if we practice today working for the advancement of others, when we discarnate are in the other side, on the spirit realm, the true life, will be easier for us to continue to do the same thing because, 2/3 are connected from those some are roaming and suffering areas, and others are working. So we would like to be the ones who are working. Okay? All right. So I might be able to leave myself here and go through the text. He says, naturally, spirits that constitute the percentage that we're referring to are still far from ideal improvement. They seek to improve in themselves what? The noble qualities that are less evolved. Seeking an adequate environment that would be suitable for this endeavor. All right, let me make sure I'm still on with everything. Everything seems to be working. So let's break this down together. So of course, if those 2/3 of spirits are still attached to earthly interests, either in suffering areas or working for the benefit of themselves and others, they are far from ideal improvement. That makes sense, right? Because if they were already improved and pure spirits, they wouldn't be attached to the earthly interests. Now, once they realize those qualities they need to work on, they seek their environment that is suitable for their endeavor. So you and I today, we started by doing our interests and our tasks and activities. Is there anything we need to work on? Most likely there is something we could work on and we would like to work on. So we resolve and gain more of those qualities in this lifetime, and then our next lifetime will be better. Are we seeking those opportunities for improvement? Are we seeking the environment that is more suitable for this endeavor? Consequently, let's think about our current environment as incarnate beings. So if you and I were put in a certain environment, either by we were born in a place, moved to a different place, we were with this family or that family, most likely those were the environments adequate for the qualities that we want to acquire. And notice that he used the word noble qualities. Like those are the qualities and interests we want to work on upon ourselves. Okay? Now, those folks who are working to improve themselves do what? So they're convinced that they are still, some of them, that they will return to the earth. I want to take myself off for a moment. To solve the problems that cloud or afflict their inner selves. They take on obscure tasks among similar incarnates or discarnates when they feel victimized by vanity or pride that still grows within themselves. So let's break it down this a little bit. Now, this study of Andrea Luiz, I found myself again here, is a very important one, but it's not the all and be all. And what do I mean? We need to go and build upon the knowledge that we had. So sometimes he's going to bring us a concept and he's not going to elaborate on it. That means that there are other books that will bring and add to that, or sometimes we're not ready to know yet. So I'm going to break this down together. Convinced that they'll return to the earth because they need to reincarnate on those things that afflict themselves, they take on obscure tasks among similar incarnates and discarnates. That could be that instead of working on bettering themselves and others, they just stay hanging out around us because those earthly interests were less elevated. Let's say, as a silly example, if my earthly interest in this life was chocolate, maybe I will stay around with those obscure tasks, less noble tasks around people who like the chocolate. And I'm being very silly, very simplistic. But let's think about this. Are we acting and behaving in a manner that would attract those similar incarnates and discarnates to be around us in tasks that are not ennobling or elevated? Remember when we talked about the chapter 16, Mechanisms of our Mind, we talked about the waves, the electromagnetic waves, and the mental currents that we produce with our mental activity, our thoughts and feelings. So whatever I'm thinking, feeling, or, consumed about is what those waves are going to travel out of my mind, radiating out of myself. And in turn, I will connect to like-minded, so I'll be in the similar vibrational level. Then I may be attracting those who are afflicted. They're similar to my affliction, and now I'm not helping them progress. So let's work today in improving those vibrational states so we can be more evolved and elevated. And remember, it's a daily task. You and I are not going to wake up tomorrow, unfortunately, but hopefully we could, as a pure spirit. So it's many, many reincarnations, just as the billions of years from our creation as a spiritual principle to a human spirit in this human kingdom. So you and I today need to work daily. Pick, for example, you can do a scientific-based way of changing habits. You can pick a habit that you want to, if you want to change. You want to put a measurable goal and a timeline to the task, and you can repeat that task. Let's say, for example, I want to eat less of a certain thing that you like to eat, twice a week less for the next 3 weeks. And if you're able to keep up with that habit, at the end of the 3 weeks, you're more likely to stick with that habit. So let's identify those things, those less ennobling tasks today. Remember our interests, and then our tasks and activities. From those tasks and activities, think about which ones are more elevated, which ones are less elevated. Oh, Shane, I like to help and feed the homeless. Great, go do it more, because then you're less involved with less elevated things that we may do. So work on those, identifying those things in yourself. Know yourself. Question 919 of the Spirit's book. Then knowing yourself and doing a reflection of your characteristics, your daily acts, we can work on improving them. Now, more into Andrea Luiz. It's more important than what I have to say. So those spirits go through invaluable learning experiences for their intelligence. Once they realize that they are still incapable of specialized endeavors of thought, notwithstanding the emotional talents they have accumulated. So some of them may stay on those tasks and still learn those less noble tasks and still learn. And some of them are still unable to do more specialized endeavors or activities. However, they have acquired some emotional talents over time. So it's not mutually exclusive. So you don't learn one time and then you work on other endeavors and then you work on emotional. It's kind of cumulative. You're working on gathering more emotional balance, emotional talents, compassion, kindness, love, humbleness, and you're working on your intelligence. You study. You and I today are working on our intelligence and our intellect. We are learning more about this book. Thus, we can use those tools. We can have our spirit toolbox. And no, I remember Andrea Luiz said this on this book, Andrea Luiz said this in that book. So when you are faced with difficult situations, you can use those examples as case studies for your own improvement. Now back to Andrea Luiz. And he says, what is the driving force of this work? Right? So they're working over there for their improvement. Some more than others, of course. It's always a scale, right? And he says, nearly all of these spirits, we're talking about those 2/3 of spirits, however, obey the dictates of love or of the ideals that inspire their conscience. So are we working on the dictates of love within our own lives? Or what are the ideals that inspire your conscience today? What are the things that you would like to work on? Noble ideals or less noble ideals? So the driving force for the work, and by work I mean the improvement, the activities that help themselves and others, is that the dictates of love. Remember, they were also talking about how they stay linked to what they left behind. And what the link could have been a loved one, someone that we loved. And one day, we're going to be so elevated because God is so good and allows us to know that our path is to progress, that we're going to be pure spirits. And then the love will be for everybody because you and I are children of God, of the same God. So we're all brothers and sisters. So we're going to love one another indiscriminately, either if it's my loved one or not, in a sense, and like blood ties. And we're going to talk about families and blood ties and spiritual ties in a little bit in the book. So they're working for their improvement to help others. Some of them are not working as much and focus on less noble ideas, activities, but the driving force is love. What do they do when they're in the spiritual realm? Where do they go? Where do you think they go? They bring, Andrea Luiz brings to us here, let me take my face one, that they converge, those spirits, in true cities and towns of varied styles, much like the earthly neighborhoods, characteristics of metropolitan or rural areas. So now, isn't that beautiful? So when we were in the discarnate realm, and so are the discarnate friends who are here with us today, watching this with you, not only your spirit mentors, but hopefully some other discarnates in the neighborhood are taking advantage of you being awake late at night in the US to watch this. They converge through cities and towns. Remember, we already saw how they talk, the language of the discarnates. We talked about volitation. We talked about, in the second part alone, we also talked about justice. And there were 2 chapters about the morphological aspect of discarnates, and also how they show themselves to mediums. And we learn that the mental activity or the thoughts of them agglutinate different pliable materials in the spiritual realm to create different things, including clothing and tools. So here, André Luiz is bringing to us, there are true cities and towns in the spiritual realm. And it shouldn't be too much of a surprise if you know of André Luiz books. And if you don't, it may be, right? Because sometimes we talk about how our physical realm is a representation of what's on the spiritual realm, right? In the spiritual plane. So in André Luiz books, he brings a description of many different cities and colonies all around. And he's talking about the true cities and towns being closest to the earth. So they are aggregated there. And what do? What are they doing over there, right? They're saying, here on the cities and towns, the spirits undertake important projects related to education and progress, for their own benefit and the benefit of others. Climbing up that scale to progress. So when you and I are thinking about this, if the spirits are discarnated and don't have a physical body like we do, are able to work on important projects for the education of themselves and others, so can we. So should we, right? And this is going to come into play because we're going to see that these important projects help specific individuals in the spiritual realm. So they not only work for the betterment of the discarnate spirits, but also for us, because as you know, our mentors are here today. They're working with us, and they're spirits who are working with our spiritist groups and other religious institutions. That's also an important project for us to better ourselves through spirituality and religion, right? Okay, so what else does he tell us about these important projects? So let's think about how many important projects have you already done? Right? We think about many, many, many lives where we were learning and repeating the lesson, effort and repetition, just as André Luiz says. So we are now undertaking important projects. Kardec Raiders are very important projects related to education and progress in both realms of life to nourish our souls. And are we doing those projects for ourselves, or are we also doing those projects for the benefit of others? Those are important things we have to think about. So there is, because God is the supreme and just intelligence, he grants, and he, for my own pronoun here, assistance to the lower regions. So he says, André Luiz says, purgatorial or infernal regions are supported by these enterprises, the important works we saw previously, as much as possible, where an extensive work of outreach assistance is organized. Now, they have this work of outreach assistance, and many of our institutions on the planet have that work of outreach assistance. So how much of that outreach assistance are we doing to others in both realms of life? Now that we are entering December, it's Christmas time, it's giving time, and it's a joyful time on the planet. Could we work a little bit harder with that work of outreach assistance in both realms of life? Of course, we want to think about physical needs for those who are less fortunate than we are. We also want to talk about different kinds of assistance, as Vanessa brought to us in a couple of chapters ago. There is one specific message on Living Spring to talk about alms. I will not remember the number right now, but I'll type it in once we're done. that Emmanuel brings to us, that there's more than just physical alms or giving to others. So this is going to come in important part because we are bringing a concept of having 2/3 of those incarnate. So remember, we haven't talked about the last third. That's the last part of this chapter. 2/3 are there. Some are in the suffering zones, roaming there. Some are working towards the improvement of others. And then they're doing these important works and outreach. So as spiritists who know there's a group of spirits that are always with us, especially in our spiritist meetings, how can we expand this outreach assistance in both realms? First, we offer, like we're doing today, study groups for different books. That's one way. Then you're going to help the incarnates that come and discarnates that come with them. And also broadcasting in the spirit realm. Now, if you are in a region that speaks a specific language, as we're going to see next, it's very important that you do those outreach programs in the language of the country that you're in. That's how you can extend that work of outreach. Because there's many more discarnates than incarnates in the room, and the majority of discarnates of that area speak that language. So let's meditate about expanding our work so that we can reach more spirits, the ones that are doing okay and the ones that are suffering, so they can be helped and move on to receive the healing and the help they need in the spiritual realm, okay? So family ties, and Andrea Luiz brings to us the concept of family ties. On the physical plane that you and I here in the physical realm are, family groups are compulsorily linked by blood ties. In the spirit plane, the family bonds are spontaneously created by affinity. Right, so what does that mean to us? And I'm going to read to you because Andrea Luiz is bringing this, and is it new? No. Why? Because Kardec, and I have it here, I'm going to take my eyes from you into the text that I selected so that I can read to you. Kardec, on the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 14, Honor Your Father and Your Mother, says, I think it's item 8, says, so there are two kinds of families. Families through spiritual ties and families through bodily ties. And I'll correct myself. Kardec compiled the answers for the spirits into the books. So Kardec is bringing to us the teachings of the spirits that says there are two types, spiritual ties and blood ties. And the spiritual ties are the ones that are durable and strengthened through purifications. And the blood ties that comes in the paragraphs before, he's talking about that can be broken. So when the discarnate spirits are in the discarnate plane, they not necessarily will be linked to the family members of their family. Most likely they will, because there was a reason to begin with they were in that family, tied by blood ties. But it may be also an entire new family that is composed of links of affinity. So remember, we're talking about the discarnate plane. What are the spirits doing there? How they're helping others, and they may be helping the ones that were left behind, incarnates from their family members, as we see, for example, in the book On Life Goes On, Ernest and Evelyn, after they are die and are in the spiritual realm, they recuperate and go back to help their family members, or they may be a series of different family members. They're linked by the spirit, not necessarily just the family, the last family on the earth. Okay. Now he goes back now to tell us something very nice, and that's, I'm going to link it back to the outreach activities that we're talking about. He says, consequently, in the spirit world, immediately next to the earthly plane, we have what he called the space of the nations, or realms of the nations, or the space with nations, depending on which translation you read. What does that mean? Those nations have their communities. Let me take myself over here so you can see the whole thing. These nations have their communities, their languages, their experiences, and inclinations. including the religious organizations. So 2 points here. If Andrea Luiz is telling us that the spirits aggregate by affinity and based on what their dictates of love and their ideals of their conscience are, they're forming nations. So around us in the spirit world, we have the nations, the countries, communities, experience, and importantly, their languages. Remember I talked about when we are doing our works, we, knowing that there's a community next to us, composed of spirits of the same affinity that speak a specific language, likely is the language of the country where you are, of the region in the world where you are. So it's our duty to share these teachings in the language of the majority so we can help them, because then they will know. Importantly, they have their own religious organizations. So if they were Jewish, they may have a Jewish synagogue. If they were Catholic, there may be a church there. If they were Spiritist, there may be a Spiritist center there. Right? So whatever they were involved with and they have affinity with, they get together and form those communities just as much as we do on the planet. What else he tells us about the religious organizations? That's a very interesting point here. He says, in these religious organizations, missionaries of mind deliberation, this is in the spirit realm, work with charity and discretion so that renewing ideas expand without laceration and without shock. Now, let's think about this together. Let's break it down. So, missionaries of mind deliberation work how? Discretion and charity. So, am I telling you to all of a sudden start doing your spiritist work and with a blowhorn, telling everybody and everywhere about spiritism? No, they're saying even those missionaries, they are working with charity and discretion. They are working on renewing those ideas, but they don't want to shock people. They don't want to break them down and lacerate them, open them up, and hurt them in the process. So they're slowly, little by little, helping those beings within those religious organizations to receive the teachings, the good news of Jesus, for example. So if they are doing this there in the spiritual realm, we have an obligation to mirror it here as well. So why? Because when we do it here, because it's not about the physical life, like I said, the spirit life is the real true life. These are internships we're doing. But through doing this today, each and every day, when I discarnate and find myself on the spirit realm, I will be trained and be able to help with charity and discretion. So expanding our outreach programs to help the physical needs of others, the spiritual needs of others, the emotional needs of others. And sometimes you don't have to do it with bragging about it. You can do it with charity. You can respect the needs of others. You can be humble about it. You don't need to put them down anyway. And more importantly, you may be able to do this within 10 feet of yourself, because God will put you in those situations where you have the opportunity to help each and every person that comes your way, starting with our family members, the closed ones, our friends, our work colleagues, and everything, without shocking them. We don't have to start proselytizing tomorrow and try to convert everybody, but we can use those teachings in a kind-hearted way to bring consolation, because spiritists bring consolation, and it's a lot of people on the planet who don't have that consolation. So now that you and I have, it's our obligation to share with them in an appropriate manner. So for example, you're not going to go to a child and talk to a child and teach them calculus, because their brain's not ready. They're not ready to learn that unless they're prodigy. The same way, when you're helping someone, you don't need to open up and talk about everything that you know about spiritism, but you can meet them where they are, just like these are doing. The missionaries of the minds are working on those religious organizations, and Andrea Luiz does not say those are spiritist religious organizations. Therefore, we can conclude that there are all kinds of religious organizations. So the missionaries are there working, bringing those renewing ideas, but gradually, again, going back to the evolution of us, we didn't evolve in leaps. We evolved gradually over time. So the renewing of ideas in any realm of life, religious or not, is gradual. So let's work on being kinder and more gentle when we do this. We can still help them and be very kind to those who are in need without shocking them. Okay, so what about the other 1/3? And some of you may have read this before, so let's do a little review of what the 2/3 have done. So here you have the 2/3 on this darker part of the pie here. They are roaming on purgatory regions. Those are the suffering regions. And there's a percentage of them that are working for their advancement and the advancement of others who are behind, who remain behind in both realms, incarnates and discarnates. Some of those who are working are doing those important works of education, the outreach programs, helping the purgatory regions. And they're forming nations, community, language, and religious institutions. So what happened to the other 1/3 here? They're just kind of like hanging out, having the real social life. We started talking about social life. See, it wasn't nowhere where we thought it would be, because when we think about social life on this planet, we think about something else. But I would say that personally, this is a social time that we're having together, because there's nothing I much rather do on a Friday night than study spiritism. Call me a geek, but as a scientist, I kind of am. So it's fine there as well. So what about this 1/3? This is what Andrea Luiz brings to us. In addition to the 2/3 of individuals that are still connected in some way to the earth, the other 1/3 is made up of what? Relatively ennobled spirits. So we have the full pie now, where we know there's the 2/3 that are not as still connected to earthly interests, and then there's 1/3 that are relatively noble. And what are they doing? Just hanging out? No, they're doing very important things. Let's see what Andrea Luiz says. So he says, let me take this. Due to the merits by which they make themselves sure instruments of the higher realms, these become leaders of the upward march of their brothers and sisters. Isn't that amazing? Because we are never forgotten by Providence. So 2/3 are still attached. 1/3 of those spirits are relatively ennobled, as these words. And due to their merits, they're making themselves instruments of the higher realms, become leaders of us on an upward march towards being a pure spirit. So, again, let's bring it back to us. Are we being sure instruments of the higher realms? So when we study all of those beautiful works, we are eternally indebted to Chico Xavier, Valdo Vieira, and the good spirits that brought those books to us. And we know of this now. Of course, one reading is not going to be enough for us to understand everything. That's why we read again, effort and repetition. We bring other books. We bring other teachings. However, today I can be an instrument of the higher realm. So I can look, remember I talked about what are your earthly interests? How elevated are they? Are they good interests, or are they earthly interests or more noble interests? What are the things that you do on a daily basis? Let's categorize them and then work on decreasing the amount of less noble tasks and then increasing the amount of more noble tasks. And knowing of all this activity that goes in the spirit realm and how much they work to help us, you can be an instrument of the higher realm. Because if we change our thought patterns and our mind, remember, mind, spiritual body, physical body. So through your spiritual body and physical body, you can act in the world by changing your thought patterns, replacing a negative thought with a positive thought by Joana de Angelis, for example, listening to Luiz Hayes, affirmations of loving yourself, you can better attune to the higher realms. And who are they around us? Your guardian angel. So you're not forgotten by God in any way. God loves you, has loved you since He created you, and He will love you for the rest of eternity. So much so that He brought you a personal trainer, a guardian angel that will be with you each and every day. All we have to do is to open up to their help, to be the instrument of higher realm. It may be you see someone who is suffering. Before you say anything and try to fix their problem right away, you mentally say, please, guardian angel, use me as an instrument. Allow me, inspire me to say a good word. Or sometimes the request is, inspire me not to say anything, but that might be helpful as well. So in each and every activity, little by little, attuning with the mentors that are with us all the time, they will inspire us to be instruments of the higher realm. We may not be quite yet on the third, they're relatively ennobled, but one day we will be. And then when we are there, we will be helping our brothers and sisters. Because remember, we talked about loving everybody. So today, I try to work on myself so that I can be an instrument, a co-creator with God each and every day, tuning with the higher realms to be of service and fulfilling whatever your reincarnatory plan is for this lifetime. Okay? And today, this is all Andrea Luiz brings to us for this chapter. Those are very those are shorter parts of the book, and they are more applicable to our daily lives. And then tomorrow, I'm gonna look to see who's gonna talk. So Vanessa will be back tomorrow with marriage. Let's see here. It will be chapter 8, marriage and divorce. Okay. Now I'm gonna see if there are any comments so that I can look at. And part of being in training to be a good spirit is to be very patient with the presenters, because sometimes there is some technology that we have to learn. And I see a lot of beautiful faces here and reactions. I really appreciate everybody's presence. I don't see many folks, so if I don't say your name, I see Sol and Leah, and I see Rihanna. So if I don't say your name, I apologize, just I can't see it right now. I really appreciate of your time and taking the time to be here with us. We hope that here at Kardec Radio, we can help you nourish your soul and gain some tools to apply in your daily lives, preparing you for the real life in the spiritual realm. And if you allow me a few more minutes of your time, I would invite you for a prayer, because it's very important that we work on connecting with the good spirit. So let's work on connecting with them so we can be inspired to be an instrument of God and spreading the good in this planet. So I'll ask you, if you can, if you're in a place that allows you to close your eyes and think about how grateful we are, dear Lord, of all the blessings that you bestow upon us each and every day. We ask you that you continue to use us as instruments of your creation. Please allow us to help each and every person in both realms of life that comes our way. Allow us to be in touch with our guardian angels, who may inspire us, who lovingly care for us during this lifetime. May all the blessings that we received today be shared with our brothers and sisters all throughout this beautiful planet Earth, both in the physical and the spiritual realm. May they feel showered by your love and your kindness. May they feel strong to withstand whatever trials they're undergoing to, knowing that all shall pass. Allow us, dear Lord, to be connected with our guardian angels each and every day, fulfilling your wishes, your will for us during this lifetime. We ask you for your permission and for your protection for us to end our session tonight. And so be it. Dear friends, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with you, for your loving kindness. I hope to see you again in about a week. And until next time, many blessings to all of you. Good night.